was not expecting the popper.
No. Welcome to Riches and Rags. Today, I'm super excited that we're joined by Hyunji Blemel. She is a photographer and a young businesswoman. And before I butcher her introduction, I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about herself instead of me. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. My name's Hyunji Blemel. I'm a photographer here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And yeah.
So one of the main things I like to emphasize on this show is the professionalization of one's passion. What would you say your passion is? Is it more photography or is it more on the business side of things?
I think I found my passion in people, really being able to capture someone and representing them to the way that I see them in a really beautiful light and the way that they exist. And that is what really excites me in being able to meet new people.
So when you're taking photography for other people, what kind of settings is it? Are they like weddings or are they for their social medias? What do you find people hitting you up for most?
I tend to do a lot of portrait work, and my favorite is senior portraits where...
Like school photos and stuff?
Yeah, someone's very, very excited, they're graduating, and I'm capturing a moment in time that they're going to look back on to really remember that joy.
A senior in high school? You work with high schoolers or is this college students?
Both, but it
Both.
typically ends up being college students in that those are mostly in my network right now.
That brings me to a really good question. How important is networking to you? When you network, do you advertise? Do you pay for advertisements? Do you rely on word of mouth?
So my business has grown in a lot of different ways. At first, I wasn't online. It was just people wanted photos and they would message me or ask me directly if I would take them. And it was mostly as a favor that I would be sending images to people. And as I've grown, I've done some advertising, some word of mouth, and seeing what has worked best. And I still think for right now for my business, it's my network. People referring their friends and families. Someone will post a picture and give me photo credits online.
Okay.
And then from there, their friends will
Are you
reach out.
active on social media? Is that a important thing for you?
Social media, I think, is the biggest place where I would advertise or post about my photography, primarily Instagram and Facebook.
Can we throw up that ticker for her on the bottom? And then how would you spell it at the Instagram?
So my Instagram handle is at Hyunju Blemel, so HYUNJUBLEMEL.
And there's no periods, it's just straight letters?
Nope, just the letters.
Right on. And I encourage everyone to go check that out. She's got a very nicely curated Instagram. And actually, when I was there, you had a link in your bio to your website. You have your own website, right?
I do.
How long have you had your website for your business? Was it in the very beginning, or at some point did you just say, it's got to happen?
It's been a little bit of both. At first, my website served as a creative platform for my fine art photography. But then as I began getting clients that I didn't know and didn't fully trust me based on saying, oh, she's great, she can do it, and they wanted to see samples, this was a place where I collected that information, and now it's definitely a more curated experience.
So you took pictures of fine art too? This is like taking pictures of like actual art, right?
So in school, I studied photography, graphic design, and visual communication. And with that, my art lent itself towards an exploration of culture and my own personal identity as an Asian American, where it wasn't for money. It wasn't for anybody else but myself. And I still do a lot of that.
How old were you when you started? I like that you say you didn't start for money or you didn't start for anybody else. It was just for you, right?
Yeah.
How old were you when you started taking pictures and doing photography?
So I always joke that I've been doing it all my life, breaking cameras, because as a kid, my parents would hand me some little camera or a Polaroid, and I would trip and fall, as a kid does.
Okay.
And break it. And to this day, I think I've broken 8 cameras. But
Damn.
most of them were before maybe being 15 years old.
Okay. Cameras are expensive, too. You don't want to break that once you get one.
But I attribute a lot of my current interest of photography to when I was in high school. I took a photography class my freshman year as an elective. I didn't sign up for it. Somehow I just got enrolled in it.
Okay.
And that's where I learned everything. I actually started in a dark room. Have you ever been in a dark room before?
Is that the room where you develop the film, or is that the red room? Is it different?
So they're the same. So
Oh,
the
that's
red
the same
light
thing?
doesn't
Okay.
expose the film.
Okay.
But my first 3 years of learning photography was all on film. I developed and printed my own imagery.
That's cool.
And it was a very hands-on experience. And it was beyond taking the picture. The process afterwards is what I think kept me really engaged in photography. Because if you spend like 15 minutes on a roll of film, you then have to spend like 3 to 10 hours just to get your printed image.
Really? Like on the film? We're talking about you putting it in the solution, right? You're getting it in the, what would you call the water? Am I imagining it right? Is that what happens in there?
Yeah, well, and before that even, you have to take your film out and develop the film itself in the chemicals.
Okay.
And then you put it on an enlarger, which basically uses the light to put it on the paper.
Okay.
And then after that is when you put it through the 3 different chemical baths to develop it.
So that's the part that caught your interest, was the actual science and the chemistry behind film itself. Mm-hmm. When you use a camera now, is it digital, or are you still developing the film like that?
So I mostly shoot digital, but if I do film, it's in color, so that way I can send it off to a lab to do it, because I don't have access to a black and white film studio anymore.
Have you ever made a camera out of like a box in a hole?
Yeah.
You ever did that?
Yeah, the pinhole cameras. I always thought they were so fun, but I could never quite get it right.
I can't understand how it works. I mean, that's how a camera works, but I just don't understand the science of it. That's awesome. So more on the university side of things, because this is where I think it gets interesting in the networking side, because you're starting to take pictures of students. They're starting to hit you up. How fast does that happen if you start pushing for it? How fast did you start taking? I mean, how busy are you? Is it every week, every month?
So it comes and goes in terms of, I call it the seasons of photography, where I do senior photos in spring, weddings in summer, and family photos in fall, getting ready for their cards that families will send out. In senior season, for 6 weeks straight, I'll be shooting every single night. I'll be meeting someone on campus or in the Bosque, getting those pictures.
That's good. That's busy.
It's very busy. But then in winter, I'm not doing anything at all. So there's also a financial planning aspect of it, of being able to get myself throughout the whole year, even if no one is really having photos taken in the winter months.
Do you do photography full time, or do you also have a side job for extra income?
So I have basically 2 jobs. I have my photography business, and then I also have a full-time job working for the University of New Mexico.
Damn.
And I'm a marketing representative, but I also act as the institutional photographer. So combining my creative business side into how to represent the university is also a fun.
So it's fair to say that your other job is also integrating what you like doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a huge piece of, that's the whole pie, actually. These are the people I'm trying to find people, is they love something, and no matter where you're going in life, you're going to figure out a way to integrate that into what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Before we get too far, you did mention that you were Asian American, you said? I think that was an important point. I think heritage is super important in general. Do you think it's important, your heritage?
Absolutely. I take great pride in being an Asian American. My mother's side of the family immigrated from Korea, and I find that I incorporate that into my work a lot of the time.
How do you incorporate your heritage into your work?
I would say that whenever I'm photographing other people of color and women and maybe underrepresented groups, I think of how I want to represent them as if it were myself. So making sure that they look really nice, the compositions are nice, that I'm giving my full respect to them and uplifting them through my image making, and that they might be able to use these photos beyond what I would be using them for.
Creating that extra value for your client.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's important too, because a lot of times in business, it's just trying to see what we can get what we can give the least and get the most. But it's, I think, important to give a little extra too to
Absolutely.
people. And that perspective thing that you ever had anything go wrong? You ever have anything come back at you where people end up not liking the photos in a certain way?
Definitely. And I will say I give all of my clients the best experience, but with that in mind, a little extra love for my communities that I feel like I represent. And it has come back to me where maybe someone doesn't like the images, maybe for creative reasons or the way they look in them. And I do have contracts that outline exactly what would happen in these sort of situations.
You got people signing papers before you do the photos?
Before I record them.
Yeah, we should. We're still kind of in the halfway point of being a business here. So thanks for not signing any papers yet, but we'll get those to you.
It's okay.
That's important.
No
That's really important because stuff can come back and bite you. Yeah. What's the craziest thing? Because you got seniors taking photos. They ever dress up weird or have any strange themes? What's the wackiest thing?
The wackiest
Or the wackiest
thing.
place someone's asked you to do photography? It's all pretty normal.
Yeah, I would say it's...
That's good.
I don't push too many barriers in that way.
Gotcha. For your heritage, you mentioned you were first generation or second generation, and what does that mean? Are you first generation Asian American or second generation?
So I'm second generation.
Okay.
It's actually my great-grandparents, grandparents, and my mom and her brother immigrated together. So I actually grew up with a small community of family members here, but I was the first generation born in the United States.
Okay. And your dad, is he also Korean?
So my dad is Anglo-American,
Okay.
and so he is Caucasian.
Nice. Yeah, I just I think of your brother too. Both of you guys are fascinating and so good at what you do because he's a really good musician, and I don't know so much about your photography stuff too, but from what I've seen on Instagram, like it looks really nice. Do you do any other things artsy like your brother music wise, or is it mostly just photography?
So for anyone who doesn't know, I have a brother who's a musician. He's incredibly talented. And what's funny is he's 6'4" and I'm 5'3". So you wouldn't initially think that we were related based on our size difference.
Talent runs in the family here.
But it's actually kind of intriguing that we ended up both going in a creative direction. He's a musician and I focus in photography and art. I never was as musically inclined. At one point, I was trying to impress someone, and I bought an accordion, and I tried to learn how to play it.
That's an interesting instrument to try and impress someone. I've never heard of an accordion trying to impress, like serenade someone romantically. That's quite an interesting choice.
Yeah, I was never very good at it, and it was always this pressure of my brother's so talented, and I never quite picked it up. But it started off this guy was like, I saw an accordion at the used music store. I really thought it suited you. And I was convinced I needed to buy that accordion.
And you ended up buying it?
Yeah, and I'm not with him anymore.
Oh. Is that important to try things and fail them? Do you think, like, for example, like trying the accordion and deciding you didn't like, even if it for reasons like trying to impress that guy or whatever, is it important to you to try things and fail?
Absolutely. If I hadn't tried photography, I wouldn't have known that I would have become good at it. And I will say I didn't start off any good. And I think most people don't start off amazing at anything.
That's pretty common. You got to be a savant to really start off amazing at anything.
Absolutely. It's years and years of work and effort. There's a kind of a running joke in the photography community when people are like, wow, your camera takes such great photos. And it's like,
I can kind of understand it.
No, I did it. Because if I handed you my camera, not you, but
no, let's say me. Yeah, pick me. If you handed me your camera, what's up?
You wouldn't necessarily get the same image.
I agree. There's no way I'd be able to probably. You develop kind of a relationship with your equipment, right? You get it to really know it, right?
Absolutely.
Do you think items have mojo? Like, for example, like this shaker that you played at the beginning, like, do you think something like a camera can hold mojo in it?
I think so. And it's a familiarity with that item, too, because I personally shoot on Nikon, but at UNM, they use Sony and previously used Canon.
So at the university, they make you use a different equipment. You don't get to use your own?
So I'm allowed to, but I always think of it as you should put miles on your work car. So if I'm at
that's a fair shout.
UNM, I'd rather have them cover the insurance of it rather than bringing my own equipment, even if it's a little bit more familiar. So it's being able to learn both languages or all three languages of it. But I find comfort in my own camera because I've been using it for so long and my fingers know exactly where to go and what motions to do. I'm sure it's similar in music.
Do you have it with you?
I do.
Can we see it? Now,
Also,
what's this big thing on the outside of it? Because I don't have those for mine here in this studio. What does that do? I'm very new to this.
So it's called a hood. And it blocks the sun rays or any light that creates flares.
So it's for shooting outside. That's probably why I don't need one here because we're inside, right? Okay.
And I know some photographers get really cute straps, but that's one investment I haven't made.
Have you ever? That's right. You've dropped 8 cameras.
Yeah, this one works. It's really sturdy. It comes with the camera.
Do you shoot with the tripod ever?
If I'm doing low light scenarios or if I'm doing star photography, astrophotography, I definitely would use a tripod. But if you imagine like a frog going from like lily pad to lily pad, just bouncing around, that's how I'd consider myself. And a tripod would probably cause me to trip and fall.
I was just like, you're so klutzy you don't use the tripod. What about the singular one? There's the monopod, right? Is that an option too that you use?
That is a great option. I tend to prefer to be very mobile and get different angles, and I'm usually like squatting or laying on the ground or standing. Okay. I also use a step stool anytime I go out shooting, so I can get a little taller.
Right, you're not as tall as other people in your family. No, I always like to think of it from a viewer's point of view who might just be thinking about starting this for the first time. It's like a lot of times it feels overwhelming, like, do I need to buy this? Do I need to buy that? I mean, what's the least one can get away with? What was this least amount of equipment you got away with?
So as I mentioned before, starting on film, I feel like a lot of old people have them and don't use them. So I got it for free. Someone just said, here, it's been on my shelf for 20 years.
Nice.
And with that, that's really nice. But also having access to a darkroom is very difficult. So I'd say your phone, with so many new capabilities on smartphones, you can do so much. And I've taught a bunch of just like clinic style workshops with people's phones and
really
built-in editing. And
so you're going beyond even the photography itself. You're even going into the realm of educating people about how to do it too. And is that something you do voluntarily? You just kind of give that time away for free, or are those classes you sell?
I do them for free, mostly for youth. I most recently did a STEAM cafe with Explora, which is a local kind of like science center for youth and teens. And STEAM, so it used to be STEM, but the A is for art now.
They took I guess art isn't as important as the other 4, right?
So we added it in. But I will say, in terms of technology, I use so much of it, from knowing how to use a camera, how the parts work, getting the equipment, putting it into a computer and knowing what software to use, how to export and deliver, to then putting it on your phone and sharing it with texts and on social media. Every single step has required technology in combination with the creative aspect that is more difficult to learn, I think.
How young is the youth that you're working with? Are they more like teens or are they like smaller kids in elementary school?
Most recently, it has been teens, especially since most of them have a smartphone. It's easy for them to
Right.
take pictures and review them immediately.
How did you get into that? Is that just something you wanted to do to give back to the community, or did the universe knock on your door asking you to do it?
I think the universe knocked on my door.
How did it present itself? How did you start working with the youth?
So for a couple of years, I was a scoutmaster for an all-girls Boy Scout troop, and there's a photography merit badge.
An all-girls boys... Wait, say that one more time.
So it's an all-girls Boy Scout troop, now referred to as Scouts BSA.
Okay.
And I would work with them on photography merit badge and also just documenting their youthful memories that I almost wished I had. And from their summer camps were asking me to teach it, especially with them going online. I was doing these online courses for them. Explora came to me. It's just that network again. They knew I took pictures. They knew I liked working with the community, and I would want to give back in that way. And from there, it just continued.
Has that blossomed into any other opportunities? Would you say like maybe parents of those kids or those kids ended up turning into like a job somewhere?
Absolutely. A lot of times they'll want to know who your teacher is, and I'll tell them my accreditations and the awards and my business.
What are your accreditations and your awards? That's important because people might think I'm just bringing any old person in here who just takes pictures. Let's hear some of those credentials.
Okay, so I have it on my phone.
That's fine.
So I can remember.
It's not a tongue twister, I hope.
So the first is that I registered my business with the U.S. government's Small Business Administration program, referred to as the SBA. So I'm a certified economically disadvantaged women-owned small business and 8A minority-owned small business. So just being able to confidently tell people that that's my background is helpful. Those specific ones are meant for contract bids where they are required to give a certain percentage of the bids to these kinds of businesses. So giving that also like lifting experience.
What does all that mean? A little more layman's terms.
So in order to be a women-owned business, 51% has to be owned by women. And because I am the primary owner of my LLC, I qualify for that. And even though I am mixed Asian American, I am still fully Asian American and would qualify for that.
That's cool. And that having that kind of accreditation opens doors for certain companies that want to work with you, or what is it? So
the way some of the government contracting bids work is everybody puts in essentially a quote, and they look at all these quotes, but they, regardless of whether or not they know who you are, they know if you check certain boxes, and they are required to give, I think, like half to businesses that are economically disadvantaged or women-owned or minority-owned. And since I qualify for all three, I would get like a second look over.
What is the government contract that you're mentioning? Is this work the government posts that you can bid to work for?
Yes.
Okay, and how does this differ from like graduation photo shoots? I mean, what's the difference here? What are you photographing?
It's a little bit more complicated, and recently I haven't been doing a lot of it just because working at UNM full time plus all of the other clients I have in Albuquerque, but those would be any business that receive government funding would then pass that money on towards subcontractors.
And you're a subcontractor in this case.
Yes.
So have you ever done like real estate or like commercial real estate, taking pictures of buildings and stuff like that?
I did for like 2 weeks.
And you were just like, this isn't for me?
No.
Again, it's still, that's the niche within your own industry, because you could love photography, but if you're doing the wrong type, you're going to hate it, right?
Absolutely. There's so many different types. And real estate didn't fit my schedule because those are all during the day. And I was working during the day.
Okay.
So logistically, it was difficult. And you have to buy a whole different set of equipment to light the buildings. And it didn't make sense for me to spend that amount of money because
Gotcha.
I couldn't take on those clients in the end.
So let me try and number some off. You've done the real estate you didn't like. You do the graduation, which is like people and profile shots. You mentioned fine arts photography and also astrophotography. Astrophotography. What is that? Is taking pictures of the sky?
Yeah, taking pictures of the Milky Way here in New Mexico. There's so many dark sky locations that you can go to see them.
Okay.
My fine art photography tends to go more into my passion projects. I mentioned a little bit about exploring my Asian American identity through self-portraits, but I also did a project called A Yellow Rose, and a couple years ago marked the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage and the women's right to vote. And I worked with a group of other women to create a series that represented how we felt about how far we've come, but really how far was that and how much more we need to do.
It's important for you to empower young women, correct?
Absolutely.
I think that's great that because definitely the business side of things, I think men dominate this industry and women have a lot to offer. They got a lot of different skills and a lot of different perspectives. Is this because you brought another thing other than your camera?
I did.
This the fine art you were just mentioning? Is this part of that Yellow Rose series?
No. So I can talk about this and then we can jump back.
Sure, yeah.
But this is what I would consider to be my first piece of fine art. And it's what's called a Lumen Print, where you take your photo paper and when you put objects on top of it in the sun, it will expose around it. So you'll see here there's some leaves that's lighter. It's because the leaves were blocking the light.
Okay.
And this was about the process because I had put some plants out. It had started raining. That's when you see the speckles. And then it got windy, but I wasn't done yet. So I took a grill grate and set it on top. Those are the lines.
Okay.
And then in the dark room, I half dipped it into developer. So that's why you have the orange and then the black. And then when you take it outside again, it re-exposes it.
Okay.
And then that's when I put it into the stop bath, which basically stops the exposures.
Yeah, would you consider this abstract?
It's very abstract.
Yeah, because I wouldn't know. All of what you've described, I would not be able to tell by looking at it. It is definitely very interesting. And again, that process that you did to make it, yeah. What is the name of this piece? Does it have a name?
It doesn't have a name. And I hang it above the light switch in my room, so I see it every single day when I leave. And it reminds me kind of where I started, in that I find this beautiful because it didn't have a goal. It just happened.
It just happened.
And I worked my way through it. And the fun thing about this, I made this in 2014 when I was in high school. Mm-hmm. And I remember just turning it in, putting it in the basket. And the next thing I know, my teacher tells me I won an award for it. And I won first place in the Albuquerque Youth Metro Art Show for silver fine art prints. And I was like, why did you submit it? I don't know. I just did it. And I turned it in, and here it is in this gallery now. But
she understood like the process that undertook to make it, and it was so unique in that aspect. That's pretty crazy. Yeah, that's so cool. And I really like that you said you hung it, or you do still hang it above or under your light switch?
Right above.
Right above your light switch. So like eye level to keep you motivated. Is this a common tactic you use in your life? Do you kind of keep things close to you that like envision or at arm's reach to keep you motivated?
Absolutely. I love hanging the art of my friends in my room too.
Okay.
So it's that motivation of a community is always around me. I'm very, I think, goal-oriented and sentimental. So having that frequent reminder of, even if I don't know what the end product is going to be, it'll work out. Like I put that trust into the universe.
I do that too. I've got a T-shirt from when I played in that band, and it's got a lineup, and one of my favorite artists was headlining that day. So I think it's important to if you've got a physical thing that like you can hold on to and look back and say, I did this, and it kind of points me in the direction where I want to go. I think there's a lot of value to that. Do you have any other things like that you use to keep you motivated?
Well, I mean, this is the only work of art that's my own that I have hanging in my house.
Okay.
I find it almost egotistical to have other work that I'm like, but I give it and I sell it to other people. But
okay. How do you keep your ego in check? I've been asking all my guests this so far. Or do you even think it's important to acknowledge the ego?
I struggle with this question because I think I do question my work sometimes. Like, am I good enough? But part of me feels the need to continue to push forward because of where I came from and I think who I represent. Like, I would rather spend that energy creating more, working harder, but trusting that my work is good. Because sometimes if I do question my art, then I wonder, like, why is someone paying for that? So even pricing myself appropriately. And I've learned too, like, I need to be competitive and make my rates what I am worth rather than maybe creating. When I first started, I didn't charge very much.
Can you say that one more time? I think that's super important. You need to be competitive. Can you say that one more time?
What do you mean?
Yeah, you just said, like, I don't know. It was, you need to be competitive and price yourself right.
Exactly.
Like, why is that important?
Yeah, I think it's very important to price yourself competitively and acknowledge what you're worth. And it is part of that ego to say, yes, someone will pay me this amount, because until they do, you don't think they will.
Okay.
But then having clients continue to book you makes you think maybe I should increase my prices. Like last year when I was booked 6 weeks straight with photos every night, I realized, am I priced right? Or would these people still pay me if I charged a little bit more? And it's not that I'm trying to make a ton of money with it, but it's that it's what I'm worth.
Absolutely. You definitely need to, make the most out of what you're doing, because then you can put it back into yourself and then give more back to the community. Like, for example, if you charge more, you'll have more free time to work with, right? I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. In this case, we can hit a fortune cookie.
Okay, let's
This
do
is
it.
what this thing is here. If you're wondering, it's a prompt to help the momentum in case I ruin it for you guys or we get lost. Would you like to grab that mallet? I'm gonna try and time this right with you.
Am I going to hit it?
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to do like a swing in it.
Sure.
Ready?
Solid. I'll let you pick a cookie there. Oh, snap. No, you're good. You're good. I just pressed it. That's not the police outside. That was a soundbite that I accidentally pressed. Let's see what it says.
I'm giving some
ASMR.
sound bites.
Oh, okay. So she's opening the fortune cookie. We're going to see if it's a winner or a dud. And I typed them out, so it might be funny text. There might be a letter or a number in there.
All things that are truly great our first thought impossible with GR8. Great.
Yeah, I had to fit the letters in. All things that are truly great are first thought impossible. What do you think? Do you agree with that or disagree with that?
I would say I agree.
Is there been anything that you thought was impossible in your life that turned out that was just like, whoa, that actually happened? Okay, I guess it is possible. Has anything in life ever surprised you like that?
I feel like everything surprises me, but
I think my uncle was right. I think these fortune cookies are duds.
I mean, it's just thinking of a specific example on the spot, like a job interview where they pitch a really hard question.
I don't want you to feel like it's a job interview. It's just supposed to spark engagement. Hey, sometimes it works. Sometimes the fortunes are not very helpful.
But I do think that this fortune resonates with the way the conversation has been going, emphasizing if you put hard work into something, you can become good at it.
Like if you were to talk to 14 or 15-year-old Hyunju and you would tell her that this is where my business is at and this is what we're doing, would you believe yourself?
I think I'd be skeptical. So one, I think, funny tidbit is that I lean so hard into this creative aspect of my life between both of my jobs. Back then, I was like a big nerd. And
Okay.
I took AP classes my senior year. I was the captain of the chess team for 3 years at my high school.
Oh, wow.
I was very convinced that I was going to go into engineering. And when I was in school, actually my first 2 years were in the electrical engineering program. And I even conducted research and published a research paper. It was on the radio frequency ID tagging of large pelagics, specifically yellowfin tuna in Hawaii, to start a discussion about sustainability and food security for local fisher people.
Damn.
And I conducted the research. I presented at the World Oceans Conference in Marseille, France.
Whoa.
And IEEE is, I think, like the International Electrical Engineering and Electromagnetic Forum, something like that. And it was right after I had published this paper that I made the jump, thinking, I really loved designing this poster. I really loved being on the boat and taking pictures of the processes and putting these images in my presentation and my paper, visually conveying the research. And I took that as my sign that if I loved that more than all of the work leading up to it, then...
You loved making the poster for the conference it was?
Mm-hmm.
More than the actual work. Yeah. Was that hard to admit to yourself? Do you feel like you wasted 2 years in that field of study?
It was hard to admit to myself, especially being in New Mexico with the national labs, that sense of job security being gone. Thinking, when I graduate, if I'm not going to be an engineer, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do in 2 years?
So
How is this going to work?
You really did take a leap of faith by kind of sacrificing a secure job for running your own business.
Absolutely. And I think there's a stigma around photography of being a starving artist, that there's nothing you can do about it. You're not going to have any money. No one's going to hire you. But there's absolutely this whole range of careers that you can be a photographer, even in the engineering industry. Those people need pictures of their projects, of their project leaders. The parts and components need to be documented. And where I'm not still in engineering, that's still an option.
Okay.
And in marketing, there are so many ways to make a living in photography that as soon as I realized that that was possible, I started running with it.
Okay. How would a brand new photographer start? What would be maybe one of the best avenues to start?
One of my mentors suggested this to me a while ago, and he told me, just pretend they're your client.
Pretend that you are your client?
Well, pick a company and pretend they're your client. So
okay.
say you pick a chip brand and you eventually want to work for that chip brand. Just pretend that they are. Go to the store, buy 10 bags of chips, and just start using your phone, taking pictures, designing layouts. Go to the local newspaper, find really bad photos or designs, and redo it. And then maybe you could come back and pitch it to them like, I saw you had a half-page ad in the paper. Here's what I suggest for next time. And if it's good enough, they'll hire you. And I never had the confidence to do that, but I did that without actually going to that company.
Have you worked with big companies before, or would you say it's mostly like people, individuals?
Mostly individuals, but a lot of artists trying to sell. I have one client who sells magic wands, handmade, hand-sculpted, hand-painted wands.
We're talking like the Harry Potter style wood. Wow.
And it was product photography, and I just...
So you had to make the wand look really nice. You had a little set for it and everything?
Oh yeah, we had a set, we had lights, but I had practiced before, thinking maybe someday if I do this, I want to at least go for it.
Yeah, that's... Or were they actually magical? Do you think those wands had some mojo in them?
I think they did. I'll send you some of the photos. Maybe you can put them up on the screen.
Yeah. What's the guy's name? Where are they on Instagram? I'm kind of curious.
I don't think they're up right now. Can we add them after? There's that.
Maybe we can find them. But yeah, it's not a big deal. Yeah. Talking about taking pictures of chips and stuff. I remember reading an article. It was for a Super Bowl commercial. There was the potato chip whisperer. There was a job so specific and so niche. It wasn't the camera guy. It was his partner whose sole job was to pick the most aesthetically pleasing potato chips, the best wave, the best curve, circle. And then after the potato chip whisperer had curated that, they did their photo shoot with the chips. It's just crazy how honed in that you can really get with an industry like this. Have you ever done any video work, like commercial kind of thing?
I've recognized that video would be a great strength to have, but there's still so much work that I can do on my photography. I'd rather focus on that and I think continue to build that skill set before I try and jump into something very similar to it.
How far in the future do you plan? Do you make plans for the future?
What do you, like for my...
Like for your, like, I guess in general, do you make like if I were to say, do you have a 5-year plan for your life? Is that a yes or no?
Well, my personal life, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's important, I think.
But for my business, I tend to take it year by year because I don't want to do so much that I hate it because I love photography so much. And I find that if I do overwork myself or set goals that are a little bit too hard on myself, I get burned out, and I don't ever want to feel that. So it's almost a little bit of a privilege to be able to cut back in that sense because I work full time, that it's not affecting my livelihood as greatly, but I just want to continue to feel joy in it no matter what.
How many years in advance would you say that you do plan your life out?
I would say about a year.
Oh, okay. And then you, like your business, you kind of adapt to what's happening.
Yeah.
How do you avoid burnout? Do you have any special skills?
It's definitely hard, but I really like to make time for myself. And also, as much as I hate to, is saying no. If I know it's a project maybe that doesn't benefit me as much, then referring it to one of my colleagues that I know could do equally as great of a job.
How do you say no?
Politely.
Politely. On the real, it's a skill, I think. Is it just like in an email? Do you do it over the phone?
It depends on how closely I'm working with that person. So if it is someone that I have worked for before, I'll call them and have a conversation. And sometimes they'll change the project a little bit to fit the timeline of everything else that I have going on in my life.
Okay.
But a lot of my conversations happen over emails.
Do you do any other personal touches with your clients? Do you maybe send them an actual, like, thank you card in the mail? Have you ever done that?
I haven't, but
No?
I really like the idea of doing something like that.
Okay. Yeah, there's just so many different tactics to keep things moving, to keep things growing. I'm just curious is all. Let's hit another fortune cookie.
Okay, that sounds good.
I'll
should
try
we
and
do the gong, or...
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
You hit it the most solid. I've had too gentle and smashed it too hard. It's a solid hit.
Oh, no.
You really like getting the soundbite on that. It's good ASMR. Okay. All right. I think I'm going to get some offensive fortune cookies. What do you think, Cameron? Should I get some?
That's a great idea.
You don't have to see the whole staircase. Just take the first step.
I like that. Do you like that?
I like that.
I think you've already described kind of that you do that. You know, you adapt to your business year by year. You don't plan too far. And you've already said that it's okay and important to make mistakes, right?
Absolutely.
What's one of the biggest mistakes you made in photography that you could give it to help some others avoid? And it could be on the creative end or it could be on the business end too.
Mm-hmm. I've made so many mistakes.
Also, is it okay if I drag this lightly?
Yeah.
Okay. I won't blow it in your face.
Okay. Okay.
I'm just playing soundbite.
I'm trying to think. I mean, I've already kind of talked about a couple.
Have you ever said like yes and then regretted it more than you should have?
I think so, and I think that usually comes to overexerting myself with timelines and deadlines of if I'm just too busy, but I do need to make some money and I'll say yes, and then I just sacrifice my own, I think, mental health and even physical health if I come home from work and I sit in front of my laptop until I go to bed and then I sleep and then repeat. That it just does not work well for me, and I get really stressed and tense, and
that's
there's no way to leave it.
Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that I would agree with is like, why live life if you don't have any time for yourself? What's a good ratio for you? How many days a week are you resting versus working, or hours in the day versus resting and working?
I like to, for my business, try and work at most maybe 20 hours a week, because that's a 60-hour work week if I'm doing 40 and 20.
Yeah.
But it works for me, especially because it's worth it, and that's something I want to do. But I try and keep it around 10 hours a week that I'm doing photography outside of my day job.
Okay. And when you're taking the time, again, to give back to yourself to avoid the burnout, is that at night? Is that broken up in the middle of the day?
It's typically at night. I play softball in a city league.
Oh, nice.
And it's usually one night a week on Tuesdays. Okay. And so just by blocking off every Tuesday night to go play softball with some of my friends, it's nice. And it's also a very regimented, scheduled activity. And I don't have to think about work because I'm at a computer all day. And now I'm just going to go run around in the grass and just
For
Jump
anyone
around.
that's just listening and who can't quite see, this is where you've lit up and smiled the most. Is that blocked off night of week you're playing softball. That is very important. That to have a one scheduled a night week for yourself, and I like that you spend it with your friends too. Do you think that being with people helps take your mind away from things you don't want to think about?
Absolutely. And I don't think anyone wants to talk about work on softball night. So we just tell funny stories in the dugout or just cheer on our team or talk about other games that we've played.
Is it more social or more athletically physical? Are you breaking a sweat or are you guys just kind of hanging out and lightly playing?
I would say a city league is more of a lightly playing activity. And we do break a sweat, though, because if you're running the bases or chasing after a softball, it's a little bit of work, but it's not the most work, which is also part of why I like to play it. It's not super competitive, and I also don't have to train because I don't have as much time to possibly train for that.
How important is exercise and physical activity for your overall life operation?
I used to think I didn't need any physical activity because in high school I played varsity softball, so it was kind of integrated in my schedule. But in all of college, I didn't. And I actually think that affected my mental health because I just didn't really have an outlet to just not think and move.
It affected it negatively or positively by not exercising?
Negatively,
yeah,
by not exercising. But then when we kind of hit the pandemic and I was working from home, I started walking every single night for an hour. And not very fast, just I feel like my mind is always moving at 100 miles an hour of what is my business deadlines? What are my work deadlines? What do my friends need from me? What do my family need from me? I wasn't thinking about myself. And just an hour every single night, walking before bed, cleared my mind and relaxed my body.
An hour before bed, walking. Do you listen to music or do you just try and stay present in the moment?
I usually try and stay present. And I actually recently started walking with my dad. So now there's more accountability. And we just talk about our days. It feels like when I was like in elementary school and you'd come home from school and just talk about whatever happened in it. Even if it's just small talk, it's that time that I didn't get before with my dad either.
Has there ever been a point in your life where you fought with your parents where like you really just didn't get along with them? Has there ever been a moment like that? Because if you're going on walks with your father, that's a good relationship, right? With your parents?
Yeah, I always, growing up, was very fortunate to have a supportive family. And I was nervous when I was switching from engineering to art.
Actually, that was a question I had thought about that had passed. Were they disappointed when you switched out of the STEM field?
I had a plan when I told them. I told them exactly how I thought I could succeed. And I think that's what made them more willing to support me. They probably would have, but at the same time, they're wondering, are you going to live in my house for the rest of the time? But it's nice being able to spend time with my family now, especially if I'm not able to go out as often.
That's good. What about your grandparents? Do you spend time with your elders, like the older people in your family? Is that important?
Absolutely. So I'm actually very fortunate to have both sets of grandparents in Albuquerque.
Oh, nice.
So all four of them are here, and I make an effort to see them at least once a month and spend time with them, usually over a meal, sharing food with them.
Do they ever try and give you weird food that you don't like?
I will eat anything.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
We've had some weird things on this podcast so far. What's some weird Korean food that we might not know about?
I wouldn't say any of it is weird. Maybe parts of the animal that aren't used as frequently in maybe American cooking.
Organs?
Definitely organs. One of my favorites is oxtail soup, where you boil the oxtails for 3 days. straight, just boiling it
That's
until
a very long time to cook food.
the broth looks like milk by the
Whoa.
time it's done, but it is so delicious.
Huh.
But I can't say I've ever gotten oxtail or oxtail soup anywhere besides my grandma's house.
Yeah, I've recently tried organs. They're hard to eat. Do you eat any other organs?
My tactic is just eat it and don't think about it. And especially growing up, that's how it always was, is like, here's a plate of food, eat it. And as an adult, knowing where maybe some of the organs are coming from is harder to mentally think about. So I always, if I'm being fed something, I always tell them up front, like, please don't tell me what's in this. I'll eat it and determine whether or not I like it based on solely like the taste or
But
texture.
because it's coming from your family, you always will try it out of politeness?
Yeah.
Or
from anyone I know.
Or just from anyone you know.
It's a good tactic.
What's the weirdest thing you've ever eaten?
I think a lot about how insects are the future in the conversation of like moving away from meat.
Geez. You really think they're in the future?
I think they are. I just the like sustainability aspect of the amount of water and energy to raise an insect through its life cycle. So in South Korea, a popular bar snack is boiled silkworms.
Now that sounds delicious.
Super high in protein. But I would say that's the only time I've eaten insects was the silkworms. They're like little tiny bugs and they're really crunchy, even if they're boiled.
I've had some worms on a stick in China before. I've also had a scorpion.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I'll try a lot of things as well. I don't really know if I could get into the whole bugs on a regular basis though. Would you eat the artificially grown meat? You know how they like will take the cells and grow them? What about that?
I mean, if it's FDA approved,
If it's FDA approved.
and someone tried to feed it to me, I would eat it.
That's interesting. I would try it too, but not if it was human meat. I don't think I would eat it if it was human meat. You'd be surprised. There's some people out there who will go at it. You know. Anyways, back to nice. We've got some pictures of bugs on the screen. Fried bugs, roasted bugs. See, yeah, I don't know.
Protein.
It is high in protein. I wouldn't eat roaches. I would do it if they were grown and it was, obviously if they were clean, but if they're like people are gathering them out of the ditches and I don't know. It's a tough call. I mean, I've had them before, but
Just think you're eating beans. They look like a bowl full of beans.
Mm-hmm.
But they're silkworms.
I'm going to go find some. Do you know, can we find this here in New Mexico? Did you know if we can find this kind of thing here?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure?
I've only ever eaten them in Korea.
Huh.
One of my aunts had suggested we go get them.
Right on. What time are we at? Let's see. Sorry. I don't want to. Nice. We still have quite a bit of time. I still want to dive into more business stuff if you're open to that.
Sure.
So, again, from a viewer who might just be starting photography, have you ever sold stuff or done business like straight through your phone? Or do you think that's unprofessional?
Like selling images?
Yeah, like if someone's like, I need a photo shoot, if someone's like, I really know how to work my phone, do you think that's acceptable?
Absolutely. I think if you want to try it, you should, but also setting the expectation to your customer of, I think just being transparent and upfront that maybe you tell them, I am going to use my phone, or I am very new at this, but I'd love to try and do this for you. And I think that initial understanding will make your client much happier in the end, instead of maybe giving a false front of that you're going to do all these crazy things, but inevitably if you can't deliver it, that's when they'll be disappointed. But phone photo shoots are so great. And even if it's starting by buy me a coffee and I'll do that for you. That's what I did at first for my friends. Like,
Oh, so you weren't even charging money at first. You were like doing it for a coffee?
exactly. Or I would buy them a coffee to let me take their picture. So I guess I was
Practicing.
losing.
Okay. Well,
But
no, I mean, you have to make it a win situation for them, right?
and their time is worth that as well. So I think just starting with your close circle that will support you no matter what. Because say you do come up with a set of images that is undeliverable. If it was for your friend's Instagram, they'll be like, cool, let's just go out next weekend. It's
Okay.
start low stakes if you're starting off and then build your way up to it. Or even find a mentor. That I've brought along photographers who want to just learn from me or see what it's like. Because it's hard to just show up to a wedding and take pictures. But if I'm bringing someone along where I know whether or not they get images that I can use, I know I can. So I'm not fully risking anything by having them, but then they get the experience of being at a wedding, shooting a wedding, and determining whether or not they like it without having to work their way all the way up to booking someone all by themselves.
Okay. You started out having one mentor, or did you have multiple mentors along the way?
I've had multiple mentors along the way. Some photographers, one is a creative director who would hire photographers. So his perspective is, when I was working with someone, this is how it went, versus photographer mentors who are on the other side being, when you're on a shoot, this is what you need to do. This is the way you should conduct yourself and work your way through that process.
Do you still have a mentor?
Absolutely. I have so many mentors.
I like to drive this point home with a lot of the creatives, and that's it's to always have a teacher, because there's always someone better than you, right?
Always.
So there's a lot of value you can learn from just, even if you're very, very good, is to still try and find someone who's a little bit better. But on the other end, you also do the mentoring, so you're also teaching, right?
Yes.
Is that important to you on both ends? Do you think that both of those perspectives help you grow creatively?
I find myself learning from both. Learning from the people mentoring me and also by mentoring, because they'll bring unique perspectives. And it's also very humbling to basically critique and provide insight on someone's shoot and then go back and show them your work, and they'll point out all the things that you just told them to do.
So like a student comes to you and then you critique their work, and then you show your work to a mentor, and then they critique your work just the same?
Exactly. And I mean, it's even for the people I'm mentoring. I have a couple of students that work for my department at UNM that I'm trying to teach the UNM brand photography style. And they'll look at my work and say, well, why didn't you do that? I just think, well, that's a good point.
Have you graduated already? Do you have your degree?
So I graduated in 2020 with my undergraduate, but I'm currently in a Master's of Business Administration doing an MBA at UNM.
How does that feel? Does that feel right?
Absolutely. I worked really hard creatively to have the work to support my business, but now I feel the need to have the business aspect to support my business.
That's a hard part for every creative person who doesn't like business. Do you have a like for business, or is it something that you're like, gotta get it done?
Part of me would rather be doing something creative, but since I did briefly come from an engineering background, the numbers and organization of things I think comes a little bit more naturally to me. But I didn't learn anything officially. So hopefully by taking accounting classes and some formal marketing classes, I'll have the evidence and proof to support what I'm doing in my day-to-day life.
But it's fair to say that a lot of your skills and tactics that you've learned have been on the streets and have been through trial and error, right?
100%.
Okay. Do you plan on pursuing education further than a master's degree? Would you say education is a passion of yours too?
I sometimes think how great it would be to be a teacher, whether maybe at the high school level from where I started, or even at the graduate level where there's undergraduate students I'm teaching. But after my master's, I've been pondering this idea of doing a PhD in research about like the social implications of being influenced, right? Of social media. I'm taking a class right now called Marketing for Managers, and it's the analytics of marketing. And my professor has his PhD in advertising.
Okay.
And how it affects people to be advertised and how research can drive or impact sales directly. So it's just I love school. I've always loved school. So the fact that I'm in school again as an adult, a lot of people are like, why? You're done. You should stop. But there's so much to learn.
Yeah, I come from that angle of like I was done, I wanted to stop. But I had a professor who had a joke that some people love school so much that they just never left. And she was just this little old sweet professor teaching linguistics. She's probably in her 70s. So, hey, maybe you'll end up like that, an old professor still at a university or a high school.
Possibly.
Would you be teaching photography, or would you think it would just be anything that comes along your way?
I would hope it's photography. In school, I always felt more inspired by people who were confident in what they were teaching about. Like,
You can see if the professor or the teacher likes what they're talking about. That's what you're saying, right?
exactly, or knows about it. Because if I were
Yeah.
to go teach world history,
Mm-hmm.
I know a little, but I don't know a lot. Whereas I feel like I'm just building all of this knowledge of photography that I could pass on rather than just going through coursework that was laid out to be taught in a different category.
For on a note of the advertising, have you paid for ads for your business, or do you rely mostly on like word of mouth?
I think I've spent maybe $100 in ads.
Really? That's it?
Yeah. And it's always like $20 a year just if things are kind of slow.
Does it help? Does it have a little bit of a difference, or?
I don't really think it has made a huge difference. Where I have an impact is on my pages, creating the promotions without backing any money behind them, just to, I think, just increase that word of mouth. And it always starts off really slow each year. But then as I get the first handful of people to start posting their images on their platforms, that's when a lot of the referrals start coming in where they're like, oh, hey, these are really good. I need photos too. Who was that?
Okay. Do you ask them to tag your name, or do they just do it on their own?
So I don't request anyone to post the pictures. That's of their own free will if they want to do that. But I do request they tag me because
You got to get your
it's
credit.
like my signature. It's
Okay. Yeah.
I want to be attributed to my hard work.
It goes back to knowing what your value is, right? And again, it helps you drum up that business. It comes back around to you, right? And then you can help more people get good photos.
Absolutely.
What platforms do you use? Do you use all the social media platforms or Pinterest at all?
So I do know that Pinterest is a huge market.
That's
for
what I've been
business.
looking into. I haven't used it yet, but it's seeming to be.
I haven't yet. I only use Facebook and Instagram personally because that's where my connections are. But if I were to start branching out, I probably would look at that. I used to be a social media manager for Dion's Pizza. And
Okay.
they also did some YouTube and Twitter. At one point, there was some Snapchat, but not recently, and looking at TikTok. But I think it's a matter of just knowing where you want to put your energy. And instead of me putting it in all of these different places, I'm just going to have it in two places that I will devote my attention to.
And where does your own website tie into that? Is that one of those two places, or is that kind of in the background?
So I just have my website linked on both of my accounts.
And what do you use your website for? Do you sell products or digital services, or is it just for your credentials?
So I technically should have two websites, but I house my fine art portfolio, which is just for fun, as well as my business samples of wedding galleries or senior photo galleries of what, if you were to hire me, it would look like. But they exist in the same place, whereas it's more expected to have two, where
Okay.
if someone wants to see your fine artwork, they're only going to go to one website, and if they only want to hire me, they would go to another. But financially, it hasn't made sense yet to justify two separate sites and to pay for those.
Do you run analytics on your website too, or I'm just curious.
I've looked at them, but I can't say it's insightful because the people going to my website usually are just end up booking me anyways.
Okay. At what point did you say you needed a website?
I used to have kind of a catch-all, but it was in the last couple years that I started paying more money to make it look really professional and nice. And I actually am paying for a service that includes a client image delivery software. So I can put the images in a gallery, send them an email, and they can download directly from that, because I used to use Google Drive or Dropbox. But it's very difficult for a client to kind of go in and download them all and view them. So the cost is justified now for me to pay a little bit more.
Okay. On a note of being transparent to your client and your audience, this is where I'm going to break the fourth wall a little bit.
Yeah.
And I actually didn't get to ask you before we started filming. Did you have any interest in like having an affiliate marketing link or a few of them in the video description below?
I had thought about it, but the thing I like about photography is you can put as little or as much money into it as you want. And the gear that I would recommend, it would be for, I think, a more advanced photographer. And usually at that point, you know what you like, you know the direction that you're going in. So I just didn't feel right to promote something, especially because I wouldn't be paid by the company either.
No, and that's part of the business model I'm trying to set up here is that like you would have to make your own account and connect with them. But something I'm trying to work out here is, like it might look muddy to advertise something on your own social media stuff. And so something like this might be an easier avenue. And I want to try and figure out a way to get the guests hooked up with, any kind of revenue that they can get. So you're not interested in mentioning what website service you use or what camera brands you use?
I mean, do you think it'd be beneficial?
It's really up to you. I mean, it doesn't matter really. It's up to you.
I will say I like Nikon.
Okay.
For my camera gear. And then the image delivery set that I use is called Pixie Set.
What is Pixie Set?
That's the platform that allows the client image gallery delivery as well as my website hosting. So they had some sort of deal where if you host your website through them, it's super discounted. I think it was like $10 to do it because I was already spending so much for the other softwares. But that does worry me a little bit because if I do move away from my business model of delivering individual galleries, if my website still exists there, I would have to create it again on another platform maybe that was cheaper, and that's really hard to do. So I would say anyone who's looking at creating a website and paying for a website, think about the longevity of, can you pay that amount of money for 10 years even if you decide to take a year off?
Yeah, these website domain holders, they make it a little difficult to switch over that name, right?
The name is easy, but all the work that you put into organizing and uploading and making it look exactly how you wanted it to is difficult.
That's something I got to keep in mind, too. That's a fair shout. Yeah, I didn't think about that too thoroughly. I was just like, let's get a website going. It's got to get it going. Nikon, that's cool. You use Nikon. Is that the brand you've always used?
Yeah, I started off on nitty-bitty little cheapy Nikon, and it was perfect for me. It did everything I needed. It was perfect. It didn't cost a lot of money. I could take pictures on it. I could take it hiking. I could drop it. But now I try really hard to not do anything bad to my camera.
If I wanted to send Nikon a video on like this clip on your behalf to try and like get you a free camera, would that be okay with you? I'm gonna start trying to reach out to these companies. I think not just for the affiliate marketing, but to like create like a relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because if you've got a good business that's like actually an LLC or whatever you've got going on, you've got your website, and you're actually using this stuff. I mean, you know, establishing a relationship with these companies, they might give you stuff to use if you just give them a shout out. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm going to experiment with some things with your permission. But like this isn't Twitch streaming live, so we can cut this part out if you want it or anything. But yeah, it's just something I need to make trial and error. Again, it's like might fail, might make mistakes, but got to try to figure out how to make the business run, right?
Exactly. Means to stay alive.
Have you gotten any sponsorships in the past of any sort?
Not really. At one point, I ran a blog called The Lobo Life, and it was basically influencer marketing of showing students all the great things of New Mexico. I was born in Albuquerque. I never want to leave Albuquerque. I love it here. My heart is here.
You wouldn't move away?
No.
No?
I love it here. There are so many great things, and I think part of myself poured myself into that blog, and a lot of businesses would trade images for the experience of wherever we were going. And since it was for the university, I was being paid that way. It, I think, really was a great trade in that regard, where I was able to be paid to go on these adventures and showcase those. So I think that's the closest thing to influencer marketing that I've done. I was actually named the 2019 New Mexico State Parks Partner of the Year.
What does that mean? The State Parks Partner of the Year?
Mm-hmm. So every year they have a set of awards. And for all of the work I was doing for them, I was really combining the idea that UNM students can go to the New Mexico State Parks very easily and affordably to have a great time. It was really cool to be recognized for that because for me, it was just a passion project. I was like, yeah, I'll go. I love the state parks. But then for them to come back and approach me and say that they liked what I was doing for them was kind of cool.
This is the second award that I'm hearing about that you didn't actually intend on getting, right? The first one was that. How many others have you gotten that you just didn't intend on? You getting any other awards or
Can I pull up?
Sure, yeah.
A couple things.
No, you have to remember everything. You're a robot. No. Notes are good.
And I always think it's a mix of being recognized, but sometimes you need to put yourself out there for that by submitting to it. So while I didn't submit the piece from earlier, my mentor, my photography teacher did, which allowed that opportunity.
And the same with this Parks Partner of the Year. Who submitted? Or was it just selected?
It was selected.
Okay.
So in my recent career, I found it important for myself to represent my work by submitting to magazines or fine art publications.
That's a really good point. And did you do showcases or anything like that too? Any maybe like art shows?
Yeah, so art shows have been part of it. So I pulled up a list. So a solo exhibition is something that I did by myself.
Okay.
And so I had a couple. I had one called Pieces, which was self-portraits that I did. And it was in the University of New Mexico Spectra Gallery. And then I also have a set of images up at Kitsch Cleaners, which is a local dry cleaning shop. It's actually my grandpa's shop, but it's a series of images I did of him working, showing this invisible labor of someone is cleaning your clothes and you wear these clothes, but who did that for you? So I did a little series on him, and I hung it up in his shop, which is, I thought, the perfect place, because where else would anyone find a series on a dry cleaner's?
And those aren't for sale. Those are permanently in the dry cleaning shop, right? It's like part of the personality of the shop?
Yeah. First, when you walk in the door, it's on the wall.
Okay. And when you did your solo exhibition, did you have to pay UNM for the gallery space, or did they just kind of give it to you?
It was while I was a student.
While you were a student. And again, did you reach out to them and ask, hey, can I have this space, or did a mentor reach out for you?
I had reached out to get it up, and that was part of putting myself out there, because not every time someone will come to you.
Again, let's drive that point home for any of the new artists or creators. You got it. You really do have to go knock on that door. We did it with my band, one of my bands too, in the past, doing a showcase for the city. And by God, what a way to get in front of people, right? Is to just go put it out there in front of people.
Absolutely. Okay, the group exhibitions mean that you worked with other people, or other people are in the show.
Mm-hmm.
So the Yellow Rose project was at Washington and Lee University, Boston University, University of Arkansas, a gallery in New Orleans called Photo Nola, Texas Christian University, Old Dominion University, Eleanor Wilson Museum in Virginia, Truman State University, the Colorado Photographic Arts Center in Denver, Indiana University, and again at UNM is where that series
So
exhibited.
You've got like a bunch of, like you said, this series, and that's moving, the group of art pieces is moving from university to university on the road. Is that what's happening?
Yes.
Or do you it's not like one piece of art is in every university right now?
So it did move, but the cool thing with the Yellow Rose project, it was with other creators all across the U.S., and there were also projected exhibitions, which is kind of a new, unique way of showing your work. So it can exist in multiple places through projectors in different galleries.
Were you on the road with your art? Were you like with the art? Physically?
Not for those shows.
No, so the art was just traveling on the road. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
And that was put on through the Yellow Rose project. Like, their art coordinators took care of those logistics, whereas usually it's yourself having to put them in the different places.
And if a piece of art like that is it able to be sold, or is it just for show?
Those were for show, and I did create them with a group of other women, so none of us have single ownership of the piece.
Gotcha. Do you have more on your list? I keep interrupting. Yes, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. No, it's good to talk. And then a couple other group exhibitions I did was one called These Systems Are Not Static, Land Arts of the American West was at UNM. I had a couple pieces about Dia de los Muertos in the UNM Maisley Gallery. I had a piece in the Four Freedoms show at the New Mexico UNM Art Museum, and then one more in the John Somers Gallery called Arts Unexpected. So it's just always working to get your work in different galleries and shows, and that, I think, community-facing experience of your art existing beyond your own website. Okay.
And you mentioned that some of these pieces were collaborative with other creators. How frequent is that? Is it mostly just your work, or would you say a lot of it is collaborative?
Even to the extent of having a person in a portrait, my photographs are collaborative, because that person is engaging with me whether or not they are actively choosing to pose in a certain way or not. I tend to do a lot of self-portraits in that I don't find that all people can resonate with my own experiences, especially if I'm talking about women's suffrage or being a Korean American woman growing up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Not everyone has that. So by removing other individuals, sometimes it's easier to reflect that, but I almost think it's harder because figuring out what's in your brain can be more difficult than working with someone else.
Do you try and work with women as much as you can, or would you say you just work with whoever comes your way?
Often I do feel that it is whatever that comes my way, but if I do have an active choice in casting or getting individuals together, I do try and make sure it's an accurate representation of who would benefit most from being in the images.
Gotcha. That's such a thought out legalese way of describing that. It's a really good to make sure that everyone's portrayed in the correct way because, again, photography in particular, perspective can really make a big difference.
Absolutely. There's this phrase called 3 in a tree. And if you might consider if you have an Asian person, a Black person, and a white person, all smiling with their books under a tree.
I love this. Where's this going?
Well, is that the most accurate representation, right? So in terms of maybe equity, possibly, because you did, in fact, represent 3 groups, but not all of the groups. But at the same time, is that real? Because it could be.
Okay.
But it oftentimes feels more fake in that regard, where it was like someone told me to put 3 groups of people in this picture. So I did, so no one can get mad.
Mm-hmm.
But it might not be the most realistic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's almost like political correctness is kind of just everywhere, even into the realm of trying to stay professional and in this aspect. Yeah.
But my goal is to go beyond that, is to take that idea but bring truth to it by incorporating larger groups of people or more of certain backgrounds. I've always wished I saw more Asian Americans being represented.
Yeah, let's use the tree example. So let's say like in real life, this real tree has real people under it, and let's say there are no Asian people under it. So how would you try and represent the picture? I mean, if someone said we need to have Asians in this picture, I mean, how do you go about that if there are none?
It's difficult in that first, like having the conversation of how can we change this and how can we plan for it moving forward, but also then finding people willing to participate with that.
It's a tough question.
And also I think it's like, say in terms of your group, you have 50, like at any university, not even UNM. These are numbers
Sure,
I'm
sure.
100% making up. This is
Made
not
up numbers.
Made up
Got it.
numbers for a made up school in Canada.
Okay.
So say your population is 60% Caucasian
Okay.
Canadians,
Okay.
and then 40% say Latinx people in Canada, and then 5% African Canadians and 5% Asian Canadians. So if you were to have 10 people, your majority of them would be the Caucasians. But what if you were in your one picture, I have 5 Asians and 1 Caucasian person? To me, I'd think, wow, that's great representation for Asian people. But
it's an inaccurate equality of outcome representation.
If I went to this Canadian school thinking, wow, there's going to be Asians everywhere, and I went there and I was one of maybe 5, did I misrepresent the school by overrepresenting the people?
Damn, that is really tricky. That is really tricky if you've got like a certain demographic of people, but you also have to represent in the most marketable way possible.
Right. And it's also a
'Cause-
tough conversation to discuss people as a marketing initiative, too, when it really should just be a representative issue. And just acknowledging race conversations are always very difficult. But for me, it's something that I'm really hoping to study and learn more to just, I think, make things feel honest and authentic and not a misrepresentation in any way possible, which is very, very difficult considering all of these aspects.
So on your personal boundary lines, if a university had absolutely no, like, let's stay on the same kind of ratios. If it had like no Asian students at all, but they said we need a photograph with some Asian students, and you're like, but I know you don't have any. How would you do business with that university? Would you just stop doing business with them because it would be an inaccurate representation? Or
I think it's just a conversation to be had of maybe they don't realize that. And it's also asking the question of why do you want Asian people? Whereas for me, I'm like,
okay, here we go.
this is why I want it. In that I grew up not seeing that. And I would love to be showing Asians in a creative field rather than just being a doctor or a lawyer, where I think our Asian parents may be pushing us in that direction. But
is that a stereotype that is also common at home too? Do you feel like you were pushed in that direction a little bit in STEM field?
I think I was pushed that way because I was inherently good at like physics and math and those sort of things. Like I would go to school and I was like, oh, this makes sense to me. But making the switch again was kind of hard. But I do know a lot of people aren't fully supported if they go in that direction.
What advice would you give to those people if they really love something but their family is not so keen on it?
I'd say the heart knows. And if your heart says that's where you need to be, or that's who you are and that's who you're meant to be, then to go for it and find those people that will support you. Because you can find another like chosen family of friends and mentors that will push you along that way and hopefully uplift you to be who you know you are meant to be.
That's so deep. I love that. Oh. What are some sacrifices you've made? Are there any like major sacrifices you've made to get to the point you're at?
I do think there's a sacrifice I've talked about a little bit to like my health or even the relationships with my friends. If I am taking photos and editing every single night of the week and they're saying, hey, we haven't seen you in a month, why aren't you hanging out with us? And at a certain point, they stop inviting you. But hoping that and I know at least with my friend group at this point that they're supporting me through that. And they know when I come out of this heavy workload darkness that they'll be waiting for me and pick up as if nothing happened. And they don't hold it against me that I did neglect them for a little bit, but they know it was for good reason.
And do you try and include any friends along the way? If they show any interest in like what you're doing, do you try and encourage them to join the journey? Or do you just kind of like let your own friends to do what they're already doing?
I'd say if they're interested, I'm always willing to bring them along, but it's not all the time that someone wants to go down the photography direction. One way that I do incorporate it is if they want to be in the pictures. For example, I have some colored backdrops that are very, I think, magazine editorial-esque, and I'll have them sit in so I can practice with them or even just hang out while I'm building my own portfolio. but I can't always bring them along to a shoot. Like if I showed up to a wedding with my friend, I'm like, oh, they're just going to have a snack and sit down. Like,
Yeah, that wouldn't work. How many weddings have you done? Is that a big moneymaker?
I'd say there is a ton of money in wedding photography, but I also have realized I don't like being very stressed out and can't commit a ton
What's
of
stressful
time.
about wedding photos?
Everyone is stressed. And I totally understand you're spending a lot of money to have 8 hours be absolutely perfect. So at first, I was saying yes to everybody, but that is one way that I have started saying no. I won't take on a wedding of more than 150 guests because at that point, it's not fun for me.
Okay.
And they need to find someone else who is geared towards a wedding like that. And I typically only take referrals where my friend or my friend is referring someone can vouch on their character that they are nice people and that I will have a good day. Because again, that's that aspect of finding joy in it. Because and I've had it where clients maybe aren't the kindest or they're a total stranger, so they're not willing to show you that kindness. I don't feel like I want to be there, and I always want to feel like I belong.
I think it's very important to navigate your way to people who want you there and who, appreciate what you're actually doing. Yeah. Have you ever doubted yourself, and how do you overcome that?
All the time. Even to this day, where I think, oh, this is new. I've never done it. But trusting that I got this far. And I always go into it with the mindset of it'll be fine. Like each scenario is so different and things can change so quickly, but I just know like they hired me for a reason. If I just keep moving and keep trying and exploring whatever I'm photographing, that it eventually will work out and look like what I promised.
If you could eventually go into just the fine arts photography, would you do that? Or do you genuinely like taking pictures of people and seeing them happy? Could you see yourself like just doing that the rest of the journey?
I really like the fine art aspect because it's for me. I think I mentioned that before, like I can do whatever I want and not have a disappointed client. But at the same time, I don't think it brings me as much excitement. I would consider myself extroverted in nature and very talkative and engaged with meeting new people, even having this conversation.
Mm-hmm. It's a new thing, not only for me, but the few people I've brought on are like, they've never been on a podcast either.
It's my first time, but I love it because it's just talking, and I feel like I love to talk.
Yeah, it's when do we really have 2 hours to just sit down and talk to someone about what we really love to do? I don't think that's very common. Not a lot of us get to do that. And I think there's a lot of value to that too, because you've actually navigated to a point where you are busy. You're making business. You're happy doing it. And there's a lot of people who want to figure that out because I think just making money's not everything. Like what is wealth to you? I'm gonna on a real note. What is wealth to you, Hyunju?
I think about this a lot, where I don't see money as the end goal. Because if I wanted money, I'd be an engineer right now. I'd be in a lab.
And you could, because you understood it and you did well. Yeah.
So, like making that sacrifice was difficult, but I do not regret it, and I don't feel sad that I don't make more money. But I do recognize the need to support yourself and to do what you want. And I think my wants are structured so they don't cost a lot of money. But I do find time to enjoy moments with friends. So every weekend, if I'm getting coffee with someone, like that costs money, and I do need money to do that. I need to pay my rent. and my car and my gas, but I feel content with my life. And whether or not I had more money right now, I don't think would change my lifestyle.
Do you ever get any requests from people for like that you would take commissions on?
What do you mean?
I know sometimes artists that draw or do art, like people will say, "Can you draw this for me?" Or "Can you do?" Have you ever had anyone say, "Can you photograph this for me?" Or "Can you do something like this?"
I've had clients want like photos themselves or their work or their art, but it's usually been in trade, whether for their art or monetary compensation, but never a percentage coming back to me. But I think that's just a space I haven't explored yet.
And do you have your art other than your you said your grandfather's laundry mat. Is it hanging anywhere else in any other places in the city here?
So I do have one piece of art in the city's public permanent art collection.
Really?
Yeah, I had it bought. I basically sold all of my copyrights to the image. I am not allowed to print it anymore. It's
Whoa.
one of one, and it exists. And I actually don't know where it is right now.
Oh, shit. Do you copyright everything you release publicly?
Absolutely.
Really? Huh.
Unless I'm selling my copyright. So clients will usually pay more for that. So my hourly rate differs for someone wanting royalty-free image usage.
Where do you copyright it? Like, is there a website you go to copyright your image?
Well, in that sense, in my contracts, I have it detailed that I do retain like the intellectual property of the images I'm giving to the client. So that means if someone hired me to do family photos, they are not allowed to turn around and sell it to a yogurt company that needs family photos for their ad.
That's super important. Ooh.
So that's where I protect myself in that way. And then anything on my website, I also have it on the bottom that the images there are copyrighted. So while I'm not registering each specific image, before I send it, I make sure that there's legal protection over that. And if it came to it, there would be additional steps for some sort of like legal battle, but I haven't experienced that.
No one's ever tried to use your material like that? Not yet?
Not yet. I've heard horror stories from different blogs and forums where people are wondering, how do I tell this person that it was for your personal use? It's in your contract. Now, how do you like bring the contract back? Like, how much do they owe you? Does the original company like take it off their website?
And I mean, by law, you have proof. Basically, they're the files, right? You can prove on your computer that these files are dated in your possession before they had them. So that plus the disclaimer on your website, you're pretty much legally covered. This is,
Mostly, except for Instagram.
Except for Instagram? What do you mean by...
I'm not fully educated to the point of being a lawyer, which I also think that could be a cool secondary career, is going to law school for copyright law. But it's this idea of once it's on Instagram, it's
You're talking
on
like
the internet.
you take a picture of it with your phone, throw it on Instagram on your profile for anyone to see.
Like, can people use that? And there's been different artists too who, I can't remember his name, but he basically took screenshots of Instagram, because then it's his photo, and then put it in basically a print of an Instagram format and put it in a gallery and profited off of that. And I think he ended up winning the lawsuit because the fact that it's like public information.
This is such a sticky situation. If only there was like a system, like a digital ledger that could prove somebody owned a piece of art on the internet somewhere, like on a blockchain technology in the form of an NFT. I don't know. we'll see if that has any merit in the future.
My favorite meme right now is like, yeah, I like NFTs, and it's noses, feets, and teeths. And then it's a picture of a dog snoot, dog paws, and dog teeth.
Okay. The big buzz is around the art right now, and it does have some practical implications. I mean, have you come across it in any of your feeds or social media, the NFT phenomenon?
I'm not super well versed. I think the funniest NFT scenario I've heard of was a person who took a selfie every day for a couple years, and then they posted like 600 pictures of themselves every day. Have you heard of that one?
I think so. If it was a guy from India, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Somewhere in South Asia. And then just made a ton of money from those images. And then I think, okay, I've taken selfies. Are they valuable? More valuable than the art that I'm, like my landscapes that I take? Is that more valuable than an image that I'm trying to hang in galleries or sell prints of for people's homes?
I think in his case, it's probably the hype around the everyday thing. I mean, he's created the idea of these are 600 in a collection, and you're only ever going to get 600 because I don't get those days back. So they are genuine, one in a kind of a bigger collection. And then, of course, he gets people hyped on him. And then it has value as art. But, I mean, you could use this in other ways, too. Like, let's say you make a wall mural and someone wants to buy the rights to it, like the actual intellectual property. Like, you could sell them the NFT that proves they own the mural. Not the paint or the wall, but the idea of the art around it. We're going to be making some NFTs here. And actually, we're going to be giving them out to the guests, too. Awesome. I'm not the one coding. My brother's doing all the coding. I just do the simple stuff on the cameras and whatnot. But, yeah, I encourage anybody listening to go look into it because the buzz is around art right now. And, of course, it's got really good uses with intellectual property, but there's utility in some of the NFTs, too, like getting certain access to places. Like, let's say you had a website, right? And you had been taking pictures of your fine art all year and you wanted a private gallery. An NFT could be like a ticket people buy, right? So you could be putting the tickets to get in. And here's the cool thing. They can only get into your website if they have one. So if they decide to sell their ticket to someone else, they can't get into the website anymore.
Oh, I see.
But here's the extra cool part. You could bake in a royalty. So if you are the producer of the tickets and then everyone starts selling the tickets, every time that ticket is sold, you get a percentage of the sale. So if they go up in value, you just keep collecting royalties. And it's all based around the idea of your intellectual property, you know, your art having a buzz around it. I think Kanye West is doing, I don't know, NFTs, but something similar with his new album. But it's going to be some fun stuff.
Yeah. And then art becomes STEM.
Art becomes STEM? What do you mean?
I think that we were talking about earlier where it's the intersection of technology.
Oh, yes.
And science and math and engineering for art. Like if you're an artist, you need to then integrate yourself into those fields and understand how they work in order to best represent yourself or profit or even protect whatever you're doing.
Well, yeah, like you had to literally learn the technology of your camera, right? And even you use software beyond that in the computer. That's a technological hurdle. Software is hard to learn if you don't know how to use it.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think it's going to get neat. Have you ever been in the metaverse?
No.
No, you don't have an Oculus? You don't have the VR set? Would you ever do the metaverse if you had a chance to?
Maybe if there was an opportunity, I'd try it. Just like with food. I'll try anything at least twice, but I don't know if it's something I would immediately spend my money on. But again, it's that idea of is that something I want to invest my limited resources in? Whereas I could invest elsewhere, maybe in additional camera gear, where I can have a higher guarantee of return on investment versus something else where the risk is a lot higher when I may not get that money back either way.
Do you try and always make sure that the things you're buying, whether it's related to photography or not, that it's always like comes back with an investment? Or do you ever just buy anything just because it's silly?
I would consider myself to be someone that plans pretty thoroughly over what I'd like to buy, but I don't have a ton of money to start with, just to be honest. And I think I have to be a little bit more intentional of where I am doing that. But I have a sweet tooth. So I'd say all my silly purchases are desserts or stopping for boba or
Damn.
getting something sweet.
That's me too. I definitely have a sweet tooth. There was a quote we read on the last one. It was like, beware of a small hole. It can sink a large ship. Yeah. It's like something like buying sweets every day might sink your ship.
Heads up.
But you have to let yourself enjoy life a little bit, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't have everything be completely wrapped around on. It can just be something silly.
Yeah.
And do you have any other nights of the week where you don't do anything at all? Do you do any like breathing exercises or just quiet nothingness? Because you've got the softball. Mm-hmm. You've got the walks. Maybe sometimes you're conversing with your father or not. But do you ever do it like just silence?
Not often.
No?
I have some friends who are very interested in meditating and yoga, and I've talked to them a little bit about it, but it hasn't been something I've explored a lot. But I find that if I have class 2 nights a week, which means I then have homework 2 nights a week, and I play softball 1 night a week, what am I doing with my other 2 nights? And usually that's when I do want to see my other friends, or I'm editing those other 2 nights. Like, it adds up very quickly to not have that time to myself. But recently I've been getting more into reading, like 30 minutes each night. Like, I'll walk and then I'll read and go to bed.
Do you read fantasy, or do you read things like practical skill books?
I love memoirs, reading what someone is writing about themselves, like while they're still alive, reflecting on their work, because I think there's something to be said about being humble and modest, but there's also something to be said about your journey and where you started, and these takes on photographic series that I admire, and then knowing what was happening in their life leading up to that in a more raw way. But if I'm not reading a memoir, it's like just for fun, maybe a romance book.
Okay. Yeah, I like to try and see if there's like tactics that creatives use to, get out of the noise of the world, because we're so bombarded with information. We're so bombarded with expectations that we give ourselves. And yeah, everybody's got different tactics. We've talked about sound baths and sound healing on this podcast, which is just listening to like bowls. Yeah, like a Himalayan bowl, like listening to it ring. Super interesting. I'm going to be trying it a little bit more.
Should do it with these headphones on.
Yeah, actually, one of the things that I have done throughout the years is called Binaural Beats. And you play one sound at one frequency and you take the other one in the other headphone. It's got to be with headphones. And it's like slightly different. And when you play them together, it creates like a wave sound in your head. And it's supposed to like chill your brain out. So you can do it when you're sleeping or while you're awake, but I don't do it too often. But I have before.
Cool.
How many hours a night do you sleep? This is something I like to ask.
So I love to sleep and I do at least 8 hours a night.
So there are nights that go above 8 hours.
Ideal is 12.
Holy shit. That's a long time to sleep.
I basically hibernate at night.
Do you ever split it up into 2 or more sleeping sessions in a 24-hour period? Or is it always in once?
It's all at once. Naps make me cranky, and anything less than 8 hours, I'm very cranky as well. And if I get 12 hours, I could do anything I want in the day.
Do you feel like sleeping too long will make you more tired? Has that ever happened to you? No?
I don't think so. I just love sleeping. I've loved sleeping my whole life. And I really do think it's that time where my body is at peace.
Okay.
So I don't know scientifically about a whole lot, but I do think it really affects my productivity if I get 8 to 12 hours.
And along the lines of increasing your productivity, do you sleep at the same times every night? Do you stick to a schedule? I'm all over the place. Like, what time do you go to bed?
So if I'm getting 8 hours, I always sleep by midnight. But if I'm trying to get a little bit more, I'll try to go to bed a little bit earlier.
And when you wake up in the morning, what's the first things that you do in the first 30 minutes to an hour? Do you...
Yeah, so my alarm will go off. I'll basically just snooze it, and then for 5 minutes, just be not fully awake, but lay in bed. And then I'll usually stretch without even getting up.
Okay. That is super important.
I'll just do my stretches in the morning, and then I will get up and go brush my teeth and put a bunch of lotion on my face because, well, I wash it, but then my skin is very, very dry. I have eczema, and being in a high desert with no humidity doesn't help either. And then from there, I'll usually check my phone because I used to check it very, very first thing. I'd wake up, I'd go through my notifications, and then I'd get tricked into scrolling.
This is the piece I'm trying to find here. Where's the phone?
Yeah. So
you discovered that delaying it helps you, right?
Absolutely. It gives me and it's almost like I kind of look forward to it. It's like if I do my routine, then I can check my phone.
Okay.
Because if I start off just scrolling and now I'm going to be late for work, I then neglect the parts of my morning that really get me ready for the day. Because then if I'm busy, I'll just throw my hair up and not even brush it. But if I don't check my phone until after, I'll really just do my routine because I know I have time. And then whatever time is left, I'll check notifications and get back to people.
I have such a bad habit of looking at my phone first thing. This is crucial, I think. Do you put your phone in a different room when you sleep, or is it nightstand next to your head?
It's a nightstand next to my head, but I silence it, and the only sounds that would go through are from my favorited contacts, which are all family members, because anyone trying to call me that late at night is probably going to be in some sort of emergency.
Yeah. And do you exercise during the day regularly? Is physical activity like an everyday thing or just a once a week softball thing?
I will at night, but I have a standing desk at work, which is kind of cool. I've never had one before since starting my recent job.
How has a standing desk been different? Is it better?
It's interesting. I do feel that some days, if I sit too long, my mind can't focus and I get tense. And if even by standing, I can kind of rock back and forth and I'll bend my knees a little bit, just stretching my legs while I am working.
I think that there's a lot to this. I need to get on this standing desk game too because my mom uses one, my brother uses one, my saxophone player uses one.
Nice.
Yeah. There's got to be something to that. Sitting can't be too good for too long.
No, especially if I'm doing it all day at work and then I go home and sit and I'm editing. It's a lot of sitting. And then I go to bed. I think it's good to move the blood.
Mm-hmm. What do you look forward to most in the year? If in the year, what's the thing you look forward to the most? Is it a birthday? Is it a holiday? Is it an event with your business?
My favorite day of the year is New Year's Day because me and my family will do a Korean feast day because the Lunar New Year will usually fall on a weekday and it's harder for everyone to take off. So we'll all get together and have like a home-cooked lucky meal that we've been prepping for a couple of weeks. And we do what's called sebe, which is where you bow to your elders and your elders give you advice. Sometimes money, but unfortunately, I am too old to be paid.
Oh, well. You opted in. You got paid the whole time you were younger, right?
I did.
Yeah.
But then I got opted out.
What age did they opt you out?
I don't think there's anything official, but I think it was in the last couple years that
So if you were
decided.
If you were to give any last piece of advice to the viewers on how to have a well-rounded and happy life, just from your point of view, what would you tell them?
I think in order to have a happy life, you have to put your heart into something, whether it's your work or your family or whatever it is. Just make sure it's meaningful because each day I think, what did I achieve? And some days I don't feel like I achieved anything worthwhile. Like we all have days like that, but I'd say most days I think today I helped someone, or today I was kind to someone, or today I delivered images that's going to make someone feel like a better version of themselves, or today I helped represent a group of people that may have been underrepresented before, or today I just had a really good softball game. Like each night, there's something that I consider meaningful, and it's taken me a very long time to curate that for myself. But as long as that exists, then like what else could you need? And most of these things that I just mentioned like don't require money really.
No, yeah, that's a big point that we're trying to discover here is that there's a lot more to having well-roundedness and wealth in life. It's not all about money.
Mm-hmm.
She's right. If you're grinding a daily job, I have one that has no meaning behind it sometimes, and it's very difficult to continue. It's the why.
It's hard. It's hard to find that.
Is there a place people can find you that you'd want them to go on the internet for your art or for your business? Is Instagram?
Yeah. So if you just type anywhere in the internet my name, I think there's only one of me, Hyunji Blemel. I have my website, hyunjublemel.com, or my Instagram at Hyunju Blemel, HYUNJUBLEMEL. And you'll find me. So you can on my website. There's a form to email me, or if you DM me on Instagram, I respond to everybody except for those weird bots.
Oh, okay.
So if you sound like a bot, don't be offended. That's your own fault.
And just to be clear, we're not discriminating against robots or AI.
Oh, sorry.
No, but yeah, and actually, just a very, very last note before we go: how important is your actual name for your marketing? Do you think that's a key thing to do? It's like your website, your name.
Mm-hmm.
Is that important?
I think. Do we have a minute to kind of talk about my name?
Yeah,
a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think your name is your signature. It's your stamp. It's why somebody is hiring you, and it's why they went to you in terms of somebody else. Okay. It's an identifier, but it's also part of your brand, and your brand is more than the font you use. It's more than the color palette you use. Your brand is the lifestyle or basically energy that you put out or into your work. And for me, that's why I chose to name it Hyunji Blemel Photography. It's hard because, right, I can't sell it, really, without someone being like, why isn't Hyunju taking my picture? And you're kind of like, oh, we bought the business from her. We bought her client list, essentially. But My name, I feel, holds a lot of meaning. So there's a very old Korean tradition where the eldest family member is able to name the children, whether that's from like a lunar chart or names that they want to pass on. And my great-grandpa, who immigrated with great-grandparents, grandparents, mom, and her brother, was the youngest of 11 and never had that opportunity. And again, this is a very old tradition. It's not common these days anymore. But my parents gave them the honor of picking a name for me and my brother.
Whoa.
And I say it's the greatest gift I've ever received.
Really?
Because it has meaning. He gave it to me. It's not something he gave to anyone else. He did give my brother a name, but it's not the same. It's so personal. And Hyunju means precious gem, which it's two characters put together to mean that. And I can't thank him enough for being that thoughtful.
That is
together.
Such a good way to name a kid. I think it's really important too. I mean, not to break the sweet story that you were telling us, but I got my name Tyler. My mom says, I had too much epidural, so your dad and his sister named you. Tyler is one who lays flooring. I don't know what, nobody in my family
it's
was.
Your destiny.
Yeah, I mean, to lay good foundations.
Yes.
Yeah.
I really like that, actually.
I'll try and find a meaning if it's silly. But yeah, maybe we should have our elders name our kids more. But where can they find you one more time before we check out? How do you spell your name?
So it's Hyunju, Hyunju, Blemel, B as in boy, Lemel. Hyunji Blemel.
Well, right on. Thank you so much for joining us today and letting me pick your brain about being a photographer.
Thanks for having me, and I hope to see great success in NFTs from the delaos.
We'll see what we can drum up. If you guys like the episode, please subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next week.